article that you're going to get, and as you read this, you should be answering these questions. So this is the title of the section and the question that goes with it. So here's our first section here. The beginning of this is just a little background. It says that the Revolutionary War was from 1775 through 1783, likely one of the first historical events you learned about in school. By now, you might have studied it enough or listened to Hamilton enough to think that you know all there is to know. But the story of our nation's founding isn't as straightforward as it sometimes is portrayed. Obviously, we just started our unit, so I don't expect you guys to know a lot yet, but maybe you just already do. But this is the first section. The beef was not just about taxes. Starting in 1764 with the Sugar Act, the British Parliament imposed a series of taxes on the 13 American colonies to raise money to pay off war debt. Parliament, by the way, is like basically the British form of government. The taxes angered the colonists, though officially ruled by British monarch King George III and Parliament. Each colony had its own local government and elected representatives. The colonists believed that their own governments, not Parliament, should tax them. That is why the rallying cry became no taxation without representation. In other words, the real effect was about who had the power to pass laws affecting the colonies, says Matthew Sick of the Museum of the American Revolution in Philadelphia. The colonists were upset about the decisions on taxes was coming from Great Britain and not American assemblies, he says. The question is, besides taxes, what other issues were the colonists caused the colonists to be upset with Great Britain? So let's talk about other issue within it. Try to get something other than taxes, because that's what we hear about mostly. So the next question that we're looking for is, why were some soldiers upset with George Washington as a leader of the Continental Army? And I want you guys to remember, make sure that you're writing 1 to 2 descriptive sentences in each box, except for our numbers 3 and 7. So when you answer this, it should be your sentence and your words, especially if you're reading with a partner. So this section says, who would dare second guess George Washington, the commander of the Continental Army and future U.S. president? Plenty of people, actually. By the fall of 1777, the Patriots had suffered a few devastating defeats, and morale among the soldiers was very low. So if you don't know what morale, it's just like meaning the mood of the soldiers. Some soldiers even reported going days and days without shoes or food. As a result, some congressmen questioned whether Washington was the right leader. They had debated replacing him with General Horatio Gates, who had won a major battle over the British in Saratoga, New York. But people loyal to Washington, including Marquis de Lafayette, defended him. When Washington, going on to the next page, got wind of what was going on, he confronted his chief rivals, Gates and General Thomas Conway, and they backed down. In the end, Washington succeeded in part because his devotion to his troops inspired the same in them. For instance, March 1783, some officers grew frustrated and discussed mutiny. Mutiny is basically like overthrowing Washington. Washington spoke with them directly, which persuaded them to quash their plans. So hint, hint, because a lot of kids asked me this question last year. This one's pretty easy, but this particular one, where it's how did he keep the loyalty, it's really just answered right there at the end that he talked to the guys that were going against him and figured out what they were mad about and got them to stop. So that's really the answer, but just write it in your own words. This one does not have to be a sentence, so you could just say he confronted the people that were against him. Or as you guys say, you could say he confronted his haters. Section 3. A French teen, so now we're on to this one. Number 4, what is at least one thing you learn about Marquis de Lafayette? Besides, he had a really cool name. The French teen became America's biggest fan, so that's this section. In 1777, a 19-year-old French aristocrat known as Marquis de Lafayette arrived in America, itching to join the colonists' fight. So, aristocrats are people that come from families with money, essentially. And he comes over to America, and he wants to take down the British. And notice he's French, and the British and French don't love each other. So that's part of the reason he's going to come over and do that. Lafayette had no combat experience. He did have a grudge against England. His father had been killed in battling British troops in the 7 Years' War in 1756 through 63. During that war, Britain had won Louisiana and Canada from France, as well as Florida from Spain. Lafayette offered to join the Continental Army as a volunteer at his own expense. With nothing to lose and hoping to take advantage of Lafayette's connections in France, Congress named the teen a general. He was basically an unpaid intern, writes Sarah Vowell in her book Lafayette in Somewhat United States. The French rookie's enthusiasm endeared him to George Washington, and the two became very close friends. Between the battles, Lafayette wrote letters to French officials, relentlessly pushing them to support the Patriots' cause. Thanks in part to his efforts, and because France was still bitter about his loss to England in the 7 Year War. France formally backed the Americans in 1778. The military and the financial help proved crucial. Lafayette came in handy in fighting as well. His troops contained the British during the pivotal battle in Yorktown, Virginia. Indeed, writes Val, the Frenchman turned out to be the best friend that America ever had. All you guys got to do in this section is pick one thing that you learned about him. Just don't write he's a French guy. Tell me maybe the fact about his dad. Tell me, how important he became to us and how good he was. It was a big kind of a surprise. Your next thing that you guys are going to answer after you pick your fact about Marquis de Lafayette is you'll go into this next question, which is in this next section, why were African Americans more likely to join the Loyalists? And we haven't really talked about Loyalists versus the Patriots or the colonists yet. So basically all this is the Loyalists are the people that are fighting to keep Great Britain in power, and the colonists or the Patriots are fighting to get rid of the British. So why are they going on the Loyalist side? Historians estimate that about 500,000 enslaved blacks were in the colonies at that time. Sorry, this breathing here is my dog. Black people faced a difficult decision. Should they choose a side and take up arms, hoping to gain personal liberty? In 1775, the British promised freedom to any enslaved people who escaped their patriot owners and joined Loyalist forces. Thousands of them risked their lives to try. The colonists were more reluctant to recruit and arm blacks. However, more than 5,000 black people, both free and enslaved, eventually served in the Continental Army. Black soldiers played a role in almost every significant battle, says Kenneth Davis, author of Don't Know Much About History series. After the war, the British agreed to a peace treaty that required them to return any property that belonged to the Americans, including the slaves. The British, refusing to send soldiers who had fought with them back into bondage, bondage is just slavery, managed to evacuate about 3,000 formerly enslaved people to freedom in Canada. However, many other black soldiers returned to their owners. As for blacks who helped liberate, the colonies from Great Britain, when the war ended, most of them found that they would not gain liberation themselves. Again, that's freedom. Most of the slaves who served in the Continental Army did not get their freedom, says Dr. Haggis, the Journal of American Revolution. So now, all you do, I don't know why I have this open, but I do. So now all you do is say, why were they more likely to join the Loyalists? That's a pretty easy answer if you are paid attention to what they said. So, and it was answered pretty early on in here. So anyway, if you can't figure that out, please go back and figure that out. Okay, so now our next section. The Americans won the battle, but not necessarily on the battlefield. So right here, the question that we're looking for is, even though Great Britain won most of the battles in the Revolutionary War, why did they give up fighting in the Revolutionary War? So this says, when you look at battle by battle, the Americans lost far more than they won, says Haggis. After all, the inexperienced colonists were up against a professional army. Why, then, did Great Britain surrender? The British didn't have a good strategy for how to put down popular rebellions, explained Haggis. Even though the Continental Army was outmatched repeatedly, they persisted, aided by France and later Spain. Got attacked by the Ons and the Netherlands, who were also eager to strip Britain of its world dominance. As a result, the war dragged on and became a global conflict. Fighting didn't take place only in North America and Europe. The Netherlands, Spain, France also battled Great Britain for territories in the Caribbean, Asia, and Africa. All these different battles eventually stretched Britain's resources to the limit. Britain had all of a sudden started to divide their military force up all over the place, said Haggis. And then here it says nearly 5 times as many Americans died per capita in the Revolutionary War as in World War II. So basically, we just had a lot more people die in the Revolutionary War versus World War II. Okay, so now you just have to answer this and then move on to the next section. So our very, very last section, fighting in Yorktown, or the fighting didn't actually end in Yorktown. This one you do not have to answer in full sentence. This says, where was the real last battle of the Revolution? It's popular belief that the war ended when British General Charles Cornwall surrendered on October 19, 1781 in Yorktown, Virginia. But that's only partially true. The British did admit defeat, but by that point, Spain and the Netherlands had also joined in the war against them. And, go up above these cool-looking dudes, it took nearly 2 years for all parties to hammer out peace treaties. In the meantime, an awful lot of fighting continued to occur, said Haggis. An early version of the peace deal would later be called the Treaty of Paris, and it was signed in France in November of 1782. But getting that news to troops fighting far away took months. As a result, the real last battle of the war happened on June 29, 1783, off the coast of India at the Bay of Bengal. There, the French and the British fleets were attacking each other when a British ship flying a white flag arrived to tell them that the war had been over for a while. So this is just talking about how they continued fighting just because they hadn't gotten word. There wasn't text messages and all this fast news. And so that's why the last battle was not in Yorktown. It was actually in India off the coast of Bay of Bengal. So that is your answer here. You don't have to write a sentence. When all this is typed out and it's in your own words and not using ChatGPT and all those fun things, turn in the Google document and it should be easy points. When you're done, what you guys will do is watch CNN 10. I will have a link to it here shortly. So right now, this is what it looks like. I'm gonna get rid of this information. It will have your Canvas assignment, and you guys will have your link to CNN 10 here. If you have other schoolwork, you can do that. What you cannot do is play games. So please watch CNN 10 and complete this assignment. After you're done completing this assignment, watch CNN 10 or do other schoolwork. just survive the day and don't cause problems. I miss you guys, and I will see you tomorrow. Goodbye.